Well, another night, another Kaufman Corner podcast, another win for the Kansas City Royals. They just can't help themselves. A lot to get to tonight here on the Kaufman Corner. MJ Melendez turns out he's not just bad at pitch framing, he's also the worst at blocking pitches. Why is he catching it all? The Royals are freshening up the broadcast crew. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Are we optimistic? Long-term contracts for young players. They seem to be a new thing, or at least back in vogue with other people in baseball. Why not for the Royals? Nicky Lopez looks really good at shortstop, at least for Team Italy. Is there actually a reason to bring up Cal Eldred's name? We'll find out. And if we've got time, we'll get to the story that I've had a couple of people bring up about all the Phillies that have contracted cancer. And you kind of think back to the Royals, if that's in the 1980 Phillies, the Royals era with Dan Quisenberry, with Dick Hauser having brain cancer. Was there something to the AstroTurf that created this cancer in Philadelphia? They're writing about it. They think it is. I'm going to try to get to it all. We'll see if we can. It's all coming up now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening. It is good evening. If you're catching us live via the stream, catch us via the podcast. We stream live, normally Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Central. Sometimes it's Monday, depending upon schedules, but back at it here on a Sunday night. The Dr. Rany Jazayerli with you. My name is Soren Petro. As we have a lot to cover, getting ever closer, Rany, to the season actually getting started. And more good news. I had the joy of listening on my drive in to work, where I do a radio show on Sports Radio 810 in Kansas City, and Jason Anderson was quoting your tweets where you were piling on further evidence that turns out MJ Melendez not good with a catcher's mitt on his hand. This time he doesn't block throws in the dirt, doesn't block errant throws really at all based upon these metrics. Not shocking if you watched it all, that the eye test said he wasn't very good. The numbers said he's the worst.
Yes, and it's not close. Let's start there, because we already have discussed the pitch framing issue that the Royals have had really for years. Salvador Perez is not a good pitch framer, and that probably costs the Royals somewhere like 5 to 10 runs a season, which is not enough to make him a bad catcher overall, but every little bit helps, and in this case, every little bit hurts. But last year, Salvador Perez was not the worst pitch framer on the team, because MJ Melendez, in something like not even 50 full games of catching, something like 450 innings, was almost historically bad. And granted, we only have pitch framing numbers for the last 15 years or so, but one of the worst pitch framers on a per inning basis that we've ever seen, to the point where you and I have both speculated that maybe he's not long for the world of catching. Now, we know the Royals have brought in, along with all the other changes they've made, they've got a new approach to catching, and Paul Hoover, the bench coach, the new bench coach from the Rays, is there and working with them to change the way that they frame, setting up closer to the plate, try and get some more of those calls. But now a new wrinkle has been added, which is, in addition to being terrible at pitch framing, I believe it was Mike Petriello at MLB.com released some new data on catchers' ability to block pitches, or basically to prevent wild pitches and pass balls, based on not just who's pitching, but where the pitch is thrown, and how far is it out of the zone, if it's in the dirt or if it's up high. They're sophisticated methods to come up, better methods than we've ever had before. And I believe there were 66 catchers on this list from 2022. The best was Adley Rutschman, the Orioles rookie, who, like a year ago, him and Bobby Witt were the two consensus best prospects in the American League. Rutschman has lived up to every defensive reputation that he had, while Bobby Witt Jr., of course, has not. But Adley Rutschman was the best pitch blocker in the majors last year. And then you look down the rest of the list. Some of these guys are above average, some are below average. 65th out of 66 catchers was, I'm trying to remember who it was. I've kind of forgotten who it was. It doesn't really matter. But it was 11 pitches below average. Okay? So the whole range.
You're talking about who was in front of MJ Melendez?
Yes, the next to last.
Yeah, it's Yasmani Grandal.
Yasmani Grandal, and I think Eric Haas. There was two guys tied. They were 11 pitches below average, correct?
Yeah, Eric Haas, they ranked just above because he had more opportunities. He saw more opportunities, so his percentage was slightly better. But yes, minus 11 was Haas.
Minus 11. So that 1 to 65, and 65 is 11 pitches below. And then there's MJ Melendez at 66 at 25 pitches below. And that's not a full-time catcher. That's a part-time catcher. That's stunningly bad. And yes, he was a rookie. And yes, the coaching probably wasn't great. But even a rookie with bad coaching to be the absolute worst by a country mile in pitch blocking, when we already knew he was last by a country mile in pitch framing, what exactly are we doing with MJ Melendez behind the plate? And at what point do we just cut bait and say this guy is a left fielder from now on? Because I've become increasingly convinced that he does not have a future behind the plate, and he will never have a future behind the plate. And the more time the Royals waste with him behind the plate, they are stunting his defensive development in the outfield and probably not helping his bat develop. And maybe they should just get on with the business of letting him be a potential middle of the order bat capable of playing any position offensively.
Well, I think if you go like Baseball Savant has these numbers, but if you look, the problem is that the other thing is like you can just toggle between like, okay, let's go to catcher framing, right? And you just go to another statistic. Let me scroll down there. There's 60 guys graded in the catcher framing. Guess who's 59? MJ Melendez, right? Salvador Perez is 57. Right, that's the pitch framing. We knew that. Okay, both these guys got to get better. We've talked about it. Paul Hoover is working with them. There's a feeling that they can get better. But then, as far as the blocking goes, and presumably these are the numbers. Like I'm assuming they're in the team's hands before they ever make it to us. Right, like they have a team. They have a number of people that are working on getting them numbers. So all these numbers should be there for them. By the time they make it to us and the general public, I would assume that this is like 3 or 4 year old data for them, right?
They should have the data, right? If they're doing their jobs, teams nowadays should have all of this information before the public. That's a difference from 10 or 15 years ago. So yes, you are right.
Right. And then if you go to the catcher blocking, you'll find that Salvador Perez comes in at 17, so he can at least block a ball. He's much better at it than what we're looking at here from MJ Melendez. So like my frustration, this just takes me back. This is, again, it's why I put out when we tweeted today, the eye test has made us think MJ Melendez isn't that good, right? Now we've got rock solid analytical data. Pitch framing comes in, not good. Blocking balls, not good. How do you arrive at the big leagues in an organization that seemingly, talks about defense, talks about pitching and defense, and you're terrible? How was it not figured out that he's terrible long before he ever got here? There's no frustration for me with MJ Melendez. It's a frustration with the organization that this wasn't either one, move him off that position, or two, trade him before the rest of the league gets wind of the fact that he can't really catch, right? Like, we're going to talk about Mike Sweeney in the broadcast booth. Mike Sweeney came all the way to the big leagues. Like, how is that not? And he's still in the organization. He's at spring training every year. Every year I talk to him at spring training. Well, when it's not a pandemic, I talk to him at spring training. There's a reminder that walks into your room every day. As an organization, we let a guy who was a premium bat get all the way to the big leagues before we got him out of there. Who knows what kind of first baseman he'd been if we'd have figured this out early on? Why did we stop behind the plate?
More than that, who knows what kind of a hitter Mike Sweeney could have been earlier in his career if he hadn't been trying to juggle the demands of hitting at the major league level, which he had clearly shown the ability to in the minor leagues. He was a very underrated prospect, but the analytics of that time told us Mike Sweeney, this like nobody prospect in the Royals organization, was quietly one of the best hitting prospects in the game. And he's listed as catcher. Now we know, you and I know now he couldn't catch, but the point is he had a tremendous bat, but for his first two or even 3 years in the major leagues as a part-time, catcher a part-time player. I should say he was a full-time catcher, but he was playing part-time. He was okay at hitting, but not great, to the point where they came this close to releasing him in spring training or trading him to the White Sox, is the rumor. He would have stayed in division, I think prior to the 99 season. And an injury to Jeremy Giambi, who went onto the then disabled list, opened up a roster spot for Sweeney to make the team. He got a chance to hit, to play, and they kind of moved him to first. They finally gave up on a catcher, moved him to first base, and then he had a 5-year stretch where he's one of the best hitters in the sport. But they almost gave up on him because forcing him to catch something he was not good at had limited his bat. And I do wonder, MJ Melendez has already shown more offensive potential than Sweeney had in the majors prior to moving to first base full time. But yeah, I wonder, could they unlock his bat by just letting him
by that, just to be clear, because Sweeney was a force with the bat. What we've seen in his limited time behind the plate as an offensive player, he's shown more than Sweeney was showing as a hitter when he was catching. Not exactly what Sweeney would go on to
become. Exactly, as I'm saying, I don't know if he'll ever be as good as Sweeney was afterwards. But the point is,
I will stick up for the people that were. I had conversations with folks back then when I was covering the team when that happened. This isn't so. I'm so ancient that I predate that happening. And they I don't think they were ever about to release Mike Sweeney. I could tell you there were some conversations, some animated conversations. The manager was very much about getting Mike Sweeney out there and trying. And the manager was Tony Muser. And Tony Muser is one of my absolute favorites. And he described conversations about it and about what was going on and about the conversations that were happening in the organization. So just to be clear, I don't think it was like, oh my God, they, we're about ready to just ship the guy. I don't think that was clear. Trade him, sure.
You're right. He wasn't about to be released, but I remember the rumor at the time that was that the White Sox were interested in, that the Royals were contemplating trading him. And I remember this because I almost had an aneurysm because they were about to give up on a guy who I had complete confidence in the bat. And then he ended up proving me right and then some, but it required a position change. Right. And I'm just saying, MJ Melendez, you're right. They should have picked up on this in the minor leagues, either fixed it, or if they realized couldn't fix it, man, you had a heck of a tradable commodity as a catcher who led the minor leagues in home runs in 2021. They clearly were not, aware that his defensive inadequacies were to this level. And that, on some level, I don't want to keep harping on the failures of the previous regime, although it's sort of the previous half regime because it's a half regime change. But yes, they should have picked up on this sooner. But now that we have the data to know, this guy is at a level that's probably beyond salvage. And you've already started the transition of him to left field. You might as well just make it a full-time thing, because I don't see how he's going to get better doing this a third of the time and playing the outfield the other 2/3 of the time.
And I want to reiterate, the biggest frustration here is that when he was considered a top prospect, when it looks like right now his greatest value that he will have in his career was going to be immediately following winning a home run title in the minors. We believe winning a home run title in the minors in AA, that's when he had his greatest value. He could have been traded for a lot. And I'm not asking him to trade for some decent starting pitcher that had 2 or 3 years control. Flip him for other prospects, right? Or flip him for one guy in the big leagues and multiple guys low. That's where you have the most important thing in all of sports that every team has to be able to do is look in the mirror and accurately see what's there. You lie to yourself and say, we're better than we are, it will destroy you. right? It will absolutely destroy you. And this is yet another one. This feeds to, and this is where they have to get better. But I'm willing to wait a whole calendar year to watch them try to get better. But they have to get better at knowing who they are and knowing when to move on guys. And I think this is further that I don't think they've. I don't know that Dayton Moore, when it got to him, maybe somewhere below, and we're hoping at JJ Piccolo, that JJ Piccolo was urging trade this guy or get this guy off this position, and Dayton just wasn't doing it, right? Because it just seems like they're like, well, we don't want to trade anybody because we're not sure who's good. And so we'll hang on to all of them because we'd rather not be a good team, but never trade away the good guy. We don't want a David Cohn for Ed Hearn. That's worse than actually trying and coming up short. And that's what you cannot succeed in a small market world when everybody reads the data, when everybody's trying, when the big money teams aren't just signing free agents, they're also developing. You can't operate that way.
Yeah. I don't have much more to say on that one. I think we're in complete agreement there. So, but again, I think what's done is done. It's water under the bridge with MJ. But I think, like you, that the next 12 months we're going to see a lot more transactionality with this team, and hopefully the what they learned with MJ, there may be other prospects in their system that they're going to have to take a good, hard, honest look at. And if they can realize, what, this guy, the other teams value this guy, the prospect mavens value player X more than we do, this trading deadline might be a good time to move on one of those guys.
What do you do now with MJ Melendez? What needs to be the path forward with Melendez?
I think the path forward at this point is you just play him in left field. And let's find out if he can manage to be a decent defensive left fielder. We don't even know if he can do that. We don't even know if he can handle that position defensively. I'm willing to give him a full season in a corner outfield spot to find out, but he's got to play it every day. If they're catching him 50 times a year, that probably also going to be DHing him a fair amount because it's going to the demands physically on catching is such he's going to need days off at DH, which means he's only going to be playing left field 50 times a year. And if you realize, he can't catch, well, he also hasn't had a chance to really develop in left field. Now you go into next year, is he a left fielder or do we have to move him to first base or even DH? So let's just end the sideshow of him catching and just make him a left fielder full time now. Yeah. And if he doesn't pan out, at least you got 162 games to find out.
I asked the question of a lot of people, like, how does he get better as a catcher if he's not catching all the time? And I got words thrown at me. I mean, there was what I would call a word salad, but nothing that really added up to like, okay, I see how playing left field part of the time is okay and not going to stun his growth as a catcher. I'm willing to let him go this whole year with all of them, like doing whatever they want to do. For 1 year, it's always the previous regime's fault. And as you said, we've got a lot of people that are still here, but to say, hey, we're doing it differently, but you can't just turn a battleship. It's not a jet ski, right? It doesn't just turn on a dime. You got to ease it around the bend. Well, if the ease around the bend is, hey, we're not quite ready on Fermin, but we want him to be there and Tresh is coming. And the plan is to get him off the catching spot, but we still need it. And we're hoping he can be a +2, -1. Yes, he's -1 behind the plate, but his bat will be +2. And when Salvi's not playing, we're going to go ahead and hope that works until we get Fermin ready. And then he comes full time to the left field. But, and I can't say that this will be their fault, but they can't continue to make these kinds of mistakes as an organization.
Right. And I mean, again, going forward, maybe it's too late with MJ Melendez, but they have a lot of catchers in that farm system that they're really high on. You mentioned Luca Tresh. Carter Jensen could be MJ Melendez 2.0 for good or evil. Like, he certainly got the bat, and we've talked about that. And we had Keith Law on, who actually complimented his defense. But that's defense as a low A ball catcher at the age of 18. If Carter Jensen can't catch at the major league level, I hope the Royals figure that out before he gets to the major leagues and either trade him when his value is high or move him to another position and not repeat this down the line. So there's going to be more, opportunities for these Royals to evaluate defense better. And especially given how important they value pitching, the one position on the field which has a direct impact on balls and strikes is catcher. Like, if you have a bad defensive shortstop or center fielder, okay, they're going to let balls drop in. But part of the problem with this pitching staff last year were the walks and strikeouts, and that's something that the catcher has impact on.
Yes. Yes. And if you're going to be a pitching and defense guy or pitching and defense team, then you need to be good at catcher and you need to be good at short. By the way, we're brought to you by our good friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. They proudly serve the entire Kansas City metro area, nationally recognized full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. So everything from just striping the lots, fixing a couple of little holes or problems to building the entire parking lot. They do it all. They've been making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. If your business has any issues with a parking lot, GAN Asphalt and Concrete is there to serve you. Go to ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. I want to, since we're talking the defense, I don't know if you've watched a little bit of the World Baseball Classic and Nicky Lopez playing for Italy, but he was quite impressive. Quite impressive with some diving stops and flips and starting some double plays. And he's actually been hitting. I'm not going to fool myself into thinking he's a 300 with a 350 on base guy year in, year out, because he just doesn't hit the ball hard enough consistently. I think he can get better than what he was last year. Somewhere in between the last 2 years is probably what he is. But again, if you're pitching in defense, I understand that they want to try Bobby Witt at shortstop because at shortstop, he's much more valuable. And they clearly believe that he's a better defender than what he showed last year. But in the end, would they have been better off just saying, we've got 2 years ago, they knew they had a gold glove shortstop. Jeff Passan said on my radio show, he should win the gold glove, and it's not even close in the American League. And that people around baseball felt that way. He didn't win the award. But if you have that good a defense in Nicky Lopez, why are you messing around with anybody else if you are going to build around pitching and defense?
You know, I would love for you to be right about this with Nicky Lopez. I was a huge Nicky Lopez honk as he came
First
up.
of all, let me. It's a question.
Okay.
It's not a declarative statement.
I would love for the answer. I would
Yes.
love for the answer to be yes. I really was a huge fan of his as a prospect coming up, in part because of the talent that he showed, but in part because the type of player he was, this sort of extreme high contact, low power, but really good defense, a throwback kind of guy, the kind of shortstop, the kind of player who could thrive in the 1980s, 1990s baseball that I grew up loving. And because the strikeout has eaten the sport alive over the last 20 years, it has become essentially impossible to survive in the major leagues simply by putting the ball in play, because nobody can put the ball in play often enough to overcome hitting the ball softly, right? In the 1980s, you could literally have players who might not hit a home run the whole year or hit one home run all year, but strike out 40 times in a season. Nobody can strike out 40 times in a season. Maybe Luis Arias, who's probably the best contact hitter in the sport right now. Even him, I'm just going to look up what did he struck out. Yeah, he's in the 40s. He's maybe the only guy who could do that. And he won the batting title last year, right? But if you are a Nicky Lopez type and you're striking out maybe 70, 80 times a year, yeah, that's not going to be enough. And for one glorious season, though, he did it, right? He hit 300 on the nose. He played great defense. He got on base. And, Baseball Reference had him, I think, at 4.3 wins above replacement. I think Fangraphs had him at even 5. I mean, that's like almost it's a down ballot MVP kind of season. He comes out last year and hits 227. The thing is, I don't think he was a radically different player. I don't think he was a significantly different player between 2021 and 2022. Batting average is the most variable of all stats. It is. You could be the exact same player, but if you're relying on balls in play, luck alone can make you a 300 hitter 1 year and a 227 hitter the next year. And if you look at his advanced metrics, Baseball Savant, his expected WOBA weighted on base average. Basically, it's like a runs created type stat, just everything in one, but framed to an on base average scale, was 283 in 2021 and 273 last year. So based on the quality of contact he made, he was only 10 points worse as a hitter last year than he was in 2021. But he got lucky on balls in play in 2021. He got a little unlucky last year. Overall, though, he was probably lucky. He was luckier to hit 300 than he was unlucky to hit 227. He's probably a 260 hitter. and 260 without any power, without a huge walk rate, even as a great defensive shortstop, that's a guy I'd love to have as a super utility guy who can just fill in everywhere, but I just don't see starting material there unless he starts to hit the ball harder.
Do you know who logged 274 at bats for a 530 OPS for a playoff team last year?
For a playoff team last year, I'm going to guess it's like one of the Astros catchers, with Martin Maldonado or something.
That would be a good guess. He probably fits it. Taylor Walls for the Rays.
Okay.
So that's where I was looking at the Rays, and I'm like, if you look at their list of hitters, how many guys on the Rays last year do you think had an 800 OPS? Just guess it fairly quick.
I'll say 2 because they have a bunch of guys who are just under 800 probably, but I'll say 2. 1. Okay.
Bunch of guys just under it. How many do you think they had who had 750?
Are we talking about guys who qualify? Because the problem, the way the Rays use guys is they have so many guys who might have had 300 or 400 plate appearances.
Anybody, whether
anybody,
20 plate appearances or not.
A 750 OPS.
Yes.
I'll say 5. 2. Jeez.
I mean, it's kind of freaky. If you want to go to say 300 at bats, the only guys with a 700 OPS, Manuel Margot, Christian Betancourt, 700, 701, G-Man Choi, 729, Paredes, 740, Franco, 746, Harold Ramirez, 747, Randy Arozarena, 773, Yandy Diaz, 824.
Right. Yandy Diaz and Randy Arozarena. Okay. The 2 things I will say about this. One is they finished 11th in the league in runs scored. So this was they made it to the playoffs barely on the strength of their pitching. So I'm not sure the 2022 Rays may not be the offense you want to emulate. But the other thing I want to point out, they play in a fairly strong pitcher's park. That ballpark reduces runs by about 7-8%.
To the Royals?
No, the Kauffman actually is a hitter's park.
It's a hitter's park because the Royals throw crappy pitching out there.
No,
because the numbers.
No, it's a bad park for home runs, but the batter's eye in Kansas City is good for batting average. Actually, as a whole, Kauffman Stadium increases offense for both pitchers and hitters, like both teams, over the last 5 to 10 years since they've last made any alterations, by something like 3 or 4%. It's not a great hitter's park, but it is an above average offensive ballpark. This is one of the secrets people don't really know about.
I'll be interested to see if those numbers hold up now, and if they start putting some actual pitching on the mound, because I think part of it, when the game becomes, it's kind of like football. You get it. One team goes down the field quick. The other team calls the plays that go down the field. One team goes 3 and out. The other team gets conservative. I think there's a little bit, we settled into a pitcher's duel here. And, let's play for 1 run. And they start taking the bat out of guys' hands. I'll be interested to see if those numbers play up that way as well as we go into this. But my point is, the Rays commit to pitching and defense, right? They commit to it. Even playing, what was the guy? I forget the guy that the Royal, Brett Phillips. I mean, Brett Phillips for 3 years has gotten significant at-bats for that team because he's an incredible defensive player.
Well, I was saying, but Brett Phillips, it's funny because, of course, he was at the Royals. He's not just his defensive stats are freakish to the point where I'm like, I keep hoping if he could just hit a little bit, he would be such a valuable player, and he never does.
And that's my point is Bobby Witt Jr. ever going to come close to what Nicky Lopez can do? And it's not like every spot on the diamond is filled because, I mean, I'm somewhat trying to give you the path to your Bobby Witt Jr.
I was about to say, if the solution here is Nicky Lopez replaces Hunter Dozier with Witt sliding to third, sign me up. That's fine.
Well, and that's what I
think we're going to see Nicky Lopez play a fair amount this season. Like you mentioned, Taylor Walls. Taylor Walls had 466 plate appearances. I don't think Nicky Lopez will get there, but he'll be over 300 plate appearances this year. So he is going to play. The problem, if anything, is that because the Royals want to commit to Bobby Witt at shortstop every day, you're going to end up with Nicky Lopez playing third base and Witt at short. And when their best defensive alignment would probably be those two switched.
Yes.
You'll be playing some second base. So yes, if they would play him at shortstop, and if that meant they will commit to Witt as their everyday third baseman going forward, I would sign up for that in a heartbeat, in part because at least then, if Nicky Lopez continues to hit like he did last year and they can't play him every day, they will consider other alternatives like Michael Garcia at shortstop rather than continuing to move Witt back and forth. But I worry that they do that. They start him at Witt at third base. Lopez doesn't hit. Then they move Witt back to shortstop. And it's kind of like the MJ Melendez situation where you're just not letting a guy develop at one position defensively and inhibiting his development.
Yeah, I listen, I get their mindset of we're going to play Bobby Witt at shortstop every day all year, which is what I think their plan is, because we want to know what he is.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't he cheaper on a long-term contract at third than he is at short?
I think teams are savvy enough now that, like, if he's a third baseman, but he has good defensive metrics, that will, like, maybe in arbitration he would make more money as a shortstop than a third baseman. Yes, because some of the arbitrators barely know how baseball works, let alone understand defensive metrics. But if he were on the free agent market, teams will look at him as a good defensive third baseman and value him more highly than a bad defensive shortstop.
But he's not on the free agent market right now. He's under the Royals' control, and if he wanted to get long-term guaranteed money, he's got to deal with one team and one team only. I don't know, but I'm like, you're giving him every shot to be a shortstop, which makes him more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's yet another reason. Like, if he actually performs there, and he could make the argument, look, I'm a good defensive shortstop. You may not think so, but I do, and I value myself like a good defensive shortstop. Therefore, I'm looking at the Fernando Tatis or the Trey Turner contract as my comp, as opposed to I'm a good defensive third baseman. I'll compare myself to players at third base who didn't get quite the contracts that some of the shortstop did. So yeah, that's probably true to some extent.
Yeah, my point is simply like, this is where you have to start going. Okay, if we're going to sign the guy long term, and it all starts with this. If you think he's a Gold Glove shortstop, great, play him at short. Play him at shortstop and get in there. If you actually think that potential is still there, but you've been around this game for a long time, you're supposed to have a scouting eye. And when was the last time you remember somebody being the worst at their position one year and then going on to being a guy that is great at that position later on in their career?
It's rare, especially at shortstop. He might get to mediocre, and I think at this point that's kind of what they're hoping for, that if he's just average. But even then, it's like, why settle for average if he could be an elite defensive third baseman? You still open up the possibility. It's not like they have an elite defensive third baseman in the organization that they have to, that they're willing to maybe sacrifice a little shortstop defense for. I think Bobby Witt could be the best defensive third baseman they have. He's not the best defensive shortstop they have. Nicky Lopez already is. Michael Garcia might be. So we're back where we started, which is, yes, Bobby Witt should be playing third base.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm willing to be patient and see what happens. Right, see where they go, see if he's going to, grow into the position and be great. I get where they're thinking. And by the way, if you're watching live, Brady Singer is not having a night, as he has just given up a 3-run homer after giving up an RBI double. So Brady Singer is allowing the Mexican team to clear the bases on a regular basis.
Okay, well, if he may be the only Royal, he may be the only Royal not having a great March. We haven't really discussed it, but I mean, the Royals are now 14-2 in spring training.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and then and on the one hand, yes, the World Baseball Classic is going on, so some of the teams are playing art at full strength. But you know what? Who's not at full strength? The Royals lead number one, MJ Melendez, their leadoff hitter. Vinny Pasquantino, maybe their number 3 hitter. Salvador Perez, their number 4 hitter. And then also Nicky Lopez. And then their number 1 starter, Brady Singer, are all off at the World Baseball Classic right now. And the Royals are continuing to kick everyone's butt. And of course, the players that they sent off to the World Baseball Classic, it's March. The Royals are unbeatable March. Salvi went 4 for 4 today, and Venezuela won. And Pasquantino and Nicky Lopez helped Team Italy move on to the second round. And they'll be playing in Japan soon. So on the one hand, the Royals continue to rake. On the other hand, today, because all those guys are gone, they beat the Guardians 7-6. They had 2 home runs from Brett Beatty, who I'm going to concede now, you're probably right, is going to make the roster, I think, at this point. He came out of the game, and Dairon Blanco pinch hit for him, basically, and hit another home run. And that's awesome, but I don't know how relevant that really is for the regular season Royals. So it's an amazing accomplishment. I'm still keeping a close eye on the pitching stats, the walks and the strikeouts. I don't know what to say at this point, except that the Royals in March have always gotten along well. It's the April through September. That's the problem. They've also done very well in October and November, I should point out, but it's just at April through September, time frame that they struggle with.
So are you more willing to buy in? I have the Royals over 68.5, and I'm debating as to whether or not I'm going to put more on it over 68.5.
I just look, they won 65 games last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they improve by 4 wins, you win that bet.
Yes.
Regression to the mean alone.
I will tell you, it is the largest wager I've made since betting became legal here in the state of Kansas.
Okay, I do not recommend people follow your example, Soren. But hypothetically,
so you're not confident?
No, it just I don't want to. I don't want to encourage.
Wait a minute.
You're
Yeah.
already
No, I'm not
gone down the degenerate gambler path.
Yes.
I just don't want to encourage other people to follow in your footsteps. But
I'd like to think my kids are still eating and clothed and going to school. So I don't know that degenerate is necessarily one. But I enjoy it. I encourage everybody to gamble responsibly. But aren't you the guy that told me the Royals will be top 8 in runs allowed and in the playoffs?
No, if the Royals are top 8 in runs allowed, they will make the playoffs. That was if. That was. I think maybe we had a little miscommunication there because I didn't think it was that hot a take. But I'm like, if the Royals are 8th or high, all right. And I stand by that. If the Royals have an average pitching staff, they will make the playoffs.
Let me add that if, because that seems to be. Are you sure it was an if?
Yes, yes, because that might explain why I was so confused that you thought it was such a hot take. I mean, I still think that's a bold projection because they merely need to be a mediocre on the pitching side.
Well, didn't we just learn that the Rays were 11th and in the playoffs?
More runs scored. So
I
mean, if you have an elite pitching staff, you can have a below average offense. If the Royals have an elite offense, they may not even need to be an average pitching staff. I don't think they'll be an elite offense, but I think they could be slightly above average. And if they're slightly above average offensively and average on the pitching side, then we can talk playoffs. But we're not talking about playoffs. We're talking about 68.5 wins here. I think even if the Royals, if you knew nothing more about the team other than they went 65 and 97 last year, 69 wins is a decent bet. If you take the history of every baseball team that's gone 65 and 97 and looked at what they did the next year, I'm quite confident more than half of them won 69 games or more. The reason I think that's so low is because the Royals really didn't add any talent this offseason. Except they may have added talent on the pitching, on the coaching side.
Right.
And I am a firm believer in the addition by subtraction here. The spring training results, in isolation are meaningless, but when you factor in what they're attempting to do with their pitching staff and what they're emphasizing and all the new pitches that we're seeing, like I need to come up with a list. Me and David Lesky were tweeting about this. It seems like every single Royals pitcher has a new pitch they're at least tinkering with. Brad Keller's throwing a curveball. Daniel Lynch has changed his slider. Chris Bubich is throwing that slider. Like, this is not your ordinary spring training tinkering. Like, I feel like there's a lot more trial and error going on here than you see in your typical spring training, certainly from guys who are already major leaguers.
Yeah, but that's par for the course for the Rays' mindset of doing things. I mean, I remember Jake Odorizzi reading when he finally broke through and was pitching well, and actually it was when he maybe he even moved on from Tampa. And they're like, well, when did it all come together for you? He's like, well, when I got to Tampa, they taught me a changeup. They're willing to get in there and work with new pitches, not just this is how we've always done it. This is what it looked like with Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz, and so we're going to do it that way forever and ever. Like, they're like, hey, let's go to work. What do you got? What do you like? And that's the mindset of this coaching staff here.
Absolutely. And so you say the Rays. Yes, this is not a big deal for the Rays. For the Royals, though, this is a very big deal. I've never seen this from the Royals. And here's the thing about the Rays: they almost always have great pitching staff. Certainly, the last 10 to 15 years. So that's where I see. I think that the talent that is here on the pitching side was sufficient that they are going to find some gems out of that group of pitchers. And yeah, I'm not going to say playoffs. I'm not even going to predict a winning record like I foolishly did last year. But at this point, I'm probably in the 74 to 77 win range pretty comfortably. I think there will be some surprises. I think there'll be some disappointments, but I think there'll be some surprising players this year. And then you factor in all the rule changes. That adds a lot of chaos to the sport as a whole. Like, if you're looking for I think in general, this is the worst year to bet chalk because all the rule changes mean that the teams that are typically great and the teams that are typically bad, I have less confidence that that will continue because we don't really have a handle on which teams are going to benefit and which teams are not going to benefit from the rule changes. But to the extent that speed, stolen bases will be more valuable, I think that benefits the Royals.
Agreed.
And I think, the pitch clock, I have no idea. I think the shift, banning the shift, I think the young hitters on this team, Pasquantino, Melendez, Nick Prado, even like they're left-handed pull hitters are the guys who are going to benefit from banning the shift. And I think the Royals have at least their fair share and probably a little bit more than their fair share of hitters who will benefit. So I think all of the rule changes benefit the Royals to some extent. So you add it all up, yeah, I think 68.5. I'm kind of surprised you can still get it at that number, to be perfectly honest with you.
The Coffin Corner podcast is brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're hiring right now. If you want to be a part of one of Kansas City's fastest growing and best companies, Gann Asphalt and Concrete is hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off, insurance as well, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more details. Long-term contracts, we're seeing those get splashed around. Now, again, remember back, what was the first guy that really got it was the Rays third baseman, drawing a blank on his name, went to the Giants.
Evan Longoria.
Evan Longoria was a guy that got one before he'd ever even really debuted. We're starting to see those kind of deals. Are you upset that we're not seeing that from the Royals, or is there a reason why they don't look like some of the other guys that are getting those contracts?
Yeah, I feel, we discuss this from time to time, and I feel like, that scab got picked a little bit when Corbin Carroll signed it was an 8-year deal with the Diamondbacks. I think $110 million is guaranteed because Corbin Carroll is, if not in the Bobby Witt Jr. class of prospect where Bobby Witt was a year ago, he's damn close. I mean, he's, number 2 prospect in the sport, and that's where Bobby Witt was last year. I think both Baseball America and MLB.com have him number 2. And, to have him for, instead of 6 years, 8 years with an option for a 9th. And this is a guy who, mind you, debuted last year. Actually, he's ahead of the game because he came up and crushed it. I mean, he had a 830 OPS, a 133 OPS plus in 32 games for the Diamondbacks as a 21-year-old last year. I mean, he's already probably the favorite for Rookie of the Year honors. That he's certainly not any behind where Bobby Witt was a year ago. He's a year older than Bobby Witt was a year ago, but the point is that ship has sailed. I would have loved this. This is the contract we wish they'd given him last spring, but fine. If that's not going to happen with Bobby Witt,
what was the Carroll contract numbers again?
I believe it was 110 million guaranteed over 8 years, with I think an option, like a $21 million option for the 9th season. So I mean that's a lot of money, but I mean it's less than I think Julio Rodriguez got. And that was after Julio had, I think, already demonstrated his ability to hit. But this is a contract we absolutely would have given Bobby Witt a year ago. I think you and I, 8 years, 111 million with a $28 million club option for the 9th year. I think at this point, if you wanted to get Bobby Witt for 8 years, it probably would be more like 150 million.
Why?
Well, you're closer to free agency, and he's at least shown a year of durability. I mean, the most important thing I think for a young player to maintain development is simply to stay healthy. The fact that Bobby Witt played a full year in the major leagues, didn't get hurt, and yes, his defensive metrics were terrible, but like you said, it's not a free agent market. It's one team can negotiate with him, and Bobby Witt, I'm sure, values himself as a good defensive infielder. He's not going to settle for less than that. He wants to be valued like at least an average defensive shortstop. Maybe 8 and 140. I don't know exactly. But the point is, it's going to be more than 8 and 111 because you're buying out an extra year of free agency,
right?
And free agents now are getting 35 million a year. What could they be getting in 8 years? He could be stepping away from $40 to $50 million for 1 year. So yeah, I think the contract will be in that range. But the Bobby Witt's part of it, but it's everyone else. I mean, okay, maybe we don't know what MJ Melendez is, but you know what? Vinny Pasquantino is the perfect guy to give a contract to. We've said he's the guy. He hasn't made a ton of money coming out of the draft. He's not an uber prospect. He's old enough that if he goes 6 years, there's a risk that he may already be starting to show signs of aging and may never get a huge deal. So he's not going to be an 8-year, $111 million guy, kind of guy. He might be more like the Keibert Ruiz contract, the other contract that came in, the catcher for the Nationals, 8 years, $50 million. Keibert Ruiz was actually a top prospect when they got him. I think they got him in the Trey Turner trade with the Dodgers.
Yes.
And had a decent rookie season. Not great. But he's young. He plays a key defensive position. 8 years and $50 million is probably a really good deal for the Nationals, to be perfectly honest. But Ruiz, because of his position, might end up being more valuable than Pasquantino. But Pasquantino can rake 8 years and $50 million, something along those lines, maybe 8 years and $60 million, because you have confidence that he can hit. You're never going to kill your franchise by awarding $7-8 million a year to a player who doesn't end up panning out. If worst case scenario, I want to see a Vinny Pasquantino extension. Brady Singer, not only is there no extension, but they went to arbitration with him over a couple $100,000, which we know significantly reduces the odds that he's going to re-sign a long-term deal. Now you got him for 4 more years. Maybe that's fine as a pitcher. Maybe you don't want to worry about that risk. I'm okay with that. But at some point, you got to sign somebody.
Yeah, but who's re-signed here?
Well, that's my point. If you don't sign them now, you're probably never going.
But when they've tried, who re-signed here? They tried Hosmer. He didn't sign here. I'm going to tell you, I've spoken with some people, and that is something that I think is a big difference. That is one of the things I think hastened the departure of Dayton Moore, and that I think probably was not to the liking of John Sherman in hearing, is that I think John Sherman's more of a realist, and we're not getting guys to play here till they're 35 or 36, right? I think Dayton Moore wants to have a party at Cooperstown for the next Royal Hall of Fame induction. In all likelihood, that's never going to happen, right? Salvador Perez, Zach Greinke are probably the last 2 chances. At least if this team is going to win, it's never going to happen because you have to turn those guys over. You have to be you can't be paying more for people to feel good about George Brett winning a Silver Slugger award, at age 38 or 39 can't happen for this franchise. Right? You can't do it. You've got to be getting value across the board for everything.
Well, you can't re-sign them at free agency, but you can sign them early. I mean, Salvador Perez is the poster boy for this. You sign him to a long-term contract.
I get tired of
before he's worth market value.
The whole Brady Singer, the 300,000. Screw you.
I actually agree with you on that point. I don't mind it with Brady Singer. I actually kind of like the cold-hearted. This is what you're worth, and it's because he's a pitcher.
But the guy threw 100 good innings, and then. You're just supposed to hand him the $300,000? No. I don't. Every other team can go to the Royals. Never went to arbitration, and it got them 3 winning seasons. It was this great stat. They never go to arbitration. 3 winning seasons.
I don't mind the idea of trying to avoid it because it does lead to acrimony with the player. Corbin Burns, who was the Cy Young contending starter for the Brewers, talked about his arbitration hearing this year, and basically was I can't look at the organization the same way again. If you value. If you have to know if you're going to go to arbitration, you're probably going to hurt your chances of keeping the guy long term. But you know what? With a pitcher who's already, almost 3 years into his career, I don't mind a little bit of a raise ruthless efficiency. I'm just saying you need to have a diversified approach. Some guys you go year to year with, and I think they're called pitchers. But young hitters, if you can, sign them early before they get expensive. Once they're a year or 2 away, now the other difference that the Royals probably will have now, as opposed to Dayton Moore, which I think you're getting at, is they're not going to go like they did in 2017 to free agency with Hosmer and Kane and Moustakas without trading any of them, and getting some sort of value. Frankly, at this point, not only do I not think Bobby Witt is going to be around for 8 years, I don't think he's going to be around as a Royal for 5 more years. Because I think in 4 years, and possibly even in 3 years, they will trade him for prospects. They will trade him for younger value.
Trade
Bobby Witt.
Yeah.
And frankly, they might be right to do so. It's the Royals, their situation is their situation. We know, they know they can't afford to sign, peak free agents at peak prices. Or if they do, they have to be very, very careful about it. I think they can from time to time. But the point is, if you're not going to sign him to a long-term deal, get value for him a year or two early. Do what the Rays have done. Do even what the Guardians have done. I mean, the Francisco Lindor trade, not popular, but they got a lot of talent for Francisco Lindor. Some of the players they got for Francisco Lindor, the infielders they got are almost as good as Lindor is now, a lot cheaper, and they have them for a lot longer. So that part of it, I'm on board with. But I don't. But I think if you do that with every single player, the amount of turnover, the amount of times you have to get it right by replacing them is just it makes your job harder. So if you can sign some guys, especially the guys who are not as elite a prospect and guys who aren't going to be as expensive to long-term deals, you give yourself a cushion. And Vinny Pasquantino is the guy to me that I just feel like the combination of what he's willing to accept, what his value is, I think that he's the perfect guy to give that extension to.
I know you wanted to talk about the broadcast crew. Do you like this is something there's one element, I'll give you first crack at it, but there's one element that I've been calling for a long time on their broadcast, and it's finally going to happen, I think, at least in spurts. Do you like the changes to the broadcast crew? Jeremy Guthrie being brought in, Mike Sweeney being brought in.
Well, Jake Eisenberg being the most important one because it's the play-by-play guy. Jake Eisenberg coming in, I'm really excited about that. I don't, I feel like I've used up all my character assassination points on Cal Eldred here. I don't want to go after too many other people, but I have mentioned on Twitter in the past my feeling that Steve Physiak was not the announcer he used to be, and was not an elite at his job anymore. And to his credit, he retired. The Royals gave him a nice send-off. It was, they probably knew that this was in the works for the last year or two, which might be why they didn't look to replace him sooner. But I think replacing him with Eisenberg is a really exciting move. It's kind of ironic that I've probably heard more Eisenberg calls over the last year or two than I have, say, Denny Matthews. That I have said a lot of the Royals radio guys for the Kansas City Royals as opposed to the Omaha Royals, because the in Omaha the games are rarely broadcast on television, but you get the radio calls, and frankly sometimes there's more exciting things going on with the prospects in Omaha over the last 2 years than there have been in Kansas City. So I've heard a lot of his calls. The excitement in his voice definitely comes through. That he's probably had more to be excited about than than the broadcasters in Kansas City have. But I think he's really technically proficient. He has emotion without being an obvious homer. It's clear that he's excited when the Royals do well. And I do feel like that's something that is sometimes missing from Royals broadcasts. And I think he'll complement Lefevre very well. And I'm excited to see, hopefully the thing I like about it is also, this is a guy they're grooming that could be a guy who might be here. He's a young guy, he's in his late 20s, and could be here for a long time and develop into a real voice of the franchise over the next many years.
I will tell you that I'm hoping that Steve Stewart gets more time too, because I think Steve Stewart does a good broadcast.
He's been a pro for a long time.
I think he's the consummate pro, and he deserves more time there. I'm excited to hear Eisenberg be a part of the equation. But I'm going to tell you the part that I have screamed for a long time is I do not understand how the radio broadcast is. Now, listen, I almost never listen to the radio broadcast. I'll tell you the only time I do is when I'm driving out to go cover the team. Like, I leave my house where I've had dinner with the family and have the game on, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go hit the post game, Q&A with the manager and get into the clubhouse. So I'll be driving out during the game, but I used to listen to more of it, and it's been screaming for player analysis. It has been the idea that everyone is Vince Scully is not true, and it has been. I remember my favorite Royals radio broadcast had John Wathan as part of it. Mike McFarland. There are so many good, guys around Kansas City that are former Royals to be a part of it. Yeah, I'm hoping Jeff Montgomery's getting more of an opportunity on the mic, but Mike Sweeney and Jeremy Guthrie there. I don't know if they're the right guys, but at least they're going down that road. I've never heard either one of them, do it. So I don't know, but I am very excited to the idea of adding and listen, adding some more thoughtful player analysis. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to take any shots that, but
I know where you're coming from, and I think it's a testament to my frustration with Steve Physioc the last couple of years that I have not focused on the player analysis part when in this discussion here. But I understand where you're coming from. I'm excited to see Sweeney and Guthrie too. I don't know what to expect because I think both guys are really smart. And I mean, Guthrie is obviously more recently a Royal, and could be very articulate and explain things well. But I am a little concerned. Will they? They're both like so positive that the advice I would give to them is, everything can't be roses and sunshine all the time. Like you don't have to be Frank White and go off on the team, but you know, be honest. If they're struggling, if there are nice ways to say that the Royals are messing up, but
Ryan
you still
Lefevre
have to.
does it. Ryan Lefevre does it all the time. It absolutely
Ryan is a pro.
yes.
He's the best for a reason. Like he can do that. Take those cues though. It's okay to point out when the Royals make mistakes. If you do that and you still provide useful analysis, then you'll be great in that.
If you can't professionally articulate how a team is struggling, you don't deserve to have the job. So get the hell off the mic. That's number one. And Ryan does a fantastic job. Ryan represents the organization very well. He talks about the team when it's struggling, never embarrasses it, never. It can be done, right? And Ryan's very good. Not everyone's going to be as good as Ryan, but he shows, yes, it can be done. I do want to take a moment. I do want to stick up for Steve Physioc from this standpoint. Um, working with Rex, not everybody at ESPN wants to work with Bill Walton. Okay, I know lots of the ESPN guys. My buddy Roxy Bernstein is one of the guys who routinely works with Bill Walton. He's out on the West Coast. He lives in the Bay Area, and so he does a lot of the West Coast and a lot of the Pac-12 games with Bill Walton. And I'll talk to him. And I know other people that are like, I don't want anything to do with Bill Walton. People that are around, like if Bill Walton's doing the game, they don't want to be the stat guy. They don't want to be like all these. They be just because he is so off the wall. Rex is not Bill Walton, but he's down that road. He starts down that road. That's not the easiest guy to work with. And furthermore, Denny communicates none with anybody else in the booth. He does his innings and he's gone. That's not the easiest guy to work with. Steve Physioc was a guy who always had somebody that he kind of went with. And so when he's on TV, Steve Physioc isn't the kind of guy that's going to bring Rex back, right? Ryan brings Rex back. When he wanders out into Rexville, Ryan, no.
It's one of Ryan's great talents is that he makes it work with Rex and it essentially is the straight man. And you can sense a chemistry there, even though, like you said, not everybody has been able to develop that with Rex.
He knows when Rex says something just out there to just let it sit and marinate on its own. You can hear the silence while he knows everybody either giggles or rolls their eyes or does whatever. And there are other times where he's like, no, wait a minute, we got a game to do. So let me bring you back in here. He's tremendous at, and Physioc, that's not an easy thing to do.
Sure.
That's not an easy partner. And then I don't think Physioc ever wanted to just sit and try to impersonate, like I say, Vince Scully. Like there's only a handful of guys that could ever just sit and call inning after inning after inning with nobody else there. And I think it's foolish. And I think that Royals booth has been that way because that's how it always was. And no one would come in and actually manage the booth. And I'm hoping that is happening now.
Yeah. And again, it's one of these things where is it going to affect the product on the field? Is bringing in new voices going to lead to wins on the field? No. Is it a sign that the Royals are willing to reconsider how they do things on a wholesale level? Yes. And so from that perspective, to me, this is a good sign that the Royals are completely, willing to rethink everything that they've been doing down to the broadcast level. Because the broadcast, I mean, they brought in Physioc and Hudler from Anaheim 12 years ago, 13 years ago. It's been a long time. And nothing's really changed over the last 13 years on the broadcast side, just like nothing really changed with the front office for 15, 16 years. And apparently nothing seemed to be changing the way that the Royals develop pitching either. So let's hope that this is all of a piece with this, the organization moving forward, adding new voices, considering new things, and that might lead to a very surprising season on the field this year.
All right. Let's close with a little nugget.
Just a nugget. I don't want to make make this a a dunk on Cal Eldred minute every week, but sometimes the news just requires me to point out. I'm just going to read to you something from a New York Times piece by the great Tyler Kepner, a longtime New York Times baseball writer. He's great. He did his a very thoughtful piece on the Royals and what they're trying to become, trying to become the Rays and the Guardians. Um, but here is his quote. Okay. And I'll save who the quote is from till the end because that actually I think might make it more interesting. So this is a quote he got for the article. Players are so informed when they sign now, with technology, metrics, use of pitches, pitch development. If you don't have people on your staff that respect that and want to have conversations with the players so they can participate in our development, the player's going to suffer. Now, I think I told you before the broadcast who said that, so I can't ask you and figure it out. But if you're playing along at home, who do you think said that? That was JJ Piccolo. That's the general manager of the Royals. I mean, if that's not him saying we have been doing things wrong for a long time, I don't know what is. So there's maybe he was not referring to Cal Eldred. Maybe he was referring to someone else involved with the development of pitchers. But I felt like that was an important quote to put out there, and hopefully an optimistic quote for us to end on because, yeah, they realize they've been doing things the wrong way, and now they're trying to do things the right way. And if you want one piece of optimism to go into this year, it's that. And we're getting closer to the season. I think you and I are both every week our win total is going up. Pretty soon we're going to be booking playoff tickets for October, but for the time being, just that's the thing I'm optimistic about is that the pitching is not going to be a disaster this year, and that alone is enough for me.
Yeah, Randy's win total inching up all the way to around 70.
97.5, baby. I told you we're going to pick the over on that.
We'll give our predictions before the season gets going. We'll get to that point when it's all said and done for sure. All right, don't forget, we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They've been making parking lot problems disappear since '94. Whatever your business needs, if it deals with the parking lot, got any kind of problems, don't hesitate. Call the good folks at Gann, 816-484-3338. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. And, of course, they're hiring as well for all positions. So check that out as well. It's at the website, GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro. We will see you next week on the call.